Good evening. Welcome. Tonight, we gently step into the universe of Greek mythology. Wherever you are listening, relax and let the story carry you away. In the beginning, there was no sky, no sea, and no land. There was only chaos, but not chaos as we understand it. It was a deep emptiness without shape, direction, or meaning. It was neither good nor evil. It simply existed. From this vast void, the first beings emerged. Gaia, the unshakable and enduring earth. Tartarus, the dark and endless abyss beneath her. And Eros, the quiet force of desire, the power that would bind all things together. Then came Nyx, the night. She was cloaked in a darkness so dense it devoured light itself. Beside her stood Erebus, the shadow of the underworld. From this union were born ether, the pure air breathed by the gods, and Hemra, the day the light destined to chase her mother endlessly across the sky. And so night and day began, not through science, but through myth, through unseen forces moving silently within the darkness. Gaia, the living earth, was never still. From her own body, she gave birth to Uranus, the endless sky filled with stars. When Uranus spread himself above her, the world took its first shape. Vast land below, and a dome-like sky stretched overhead. Gaia gave birth to the mountains, wild and unbreakable. Then came Pontus, the restless sea, existing long before ships and legends. Earth and sky became the first great union, and from them were born the Titans, who ruled the universe before the age of the gods. There were 12 Titans in total, and each represented a force of existence. Some ruled light and memory, others law, time, or the flow of the world. Among them, the youngest was Cronus, clever, dangerous, and one who listened to the future in silence. But Gaia's children were not only rulers. She gave birth to the Cyclopes, with a single blazing eye, masters of thunder and fire. Then came the 100-handed ones, being so vast and terrifying that their rage could shake the foundations of the world. Uranus, lord of the sky, felt not admiration but fear when he looked upon his children. Their power and vastness terrified him. Instead of accepting the Cyclopes and the 100-handed ones, he forced them back into Gaia, imprisoning them in the deepest place of the earth, where light could not reach. Gaia suffered under this burden. Every breath became pain. The earth that was once fertile now carried betrayal, and from this pain, a plan was born. Before laws existed, before justice was known, the world was shaped by raw power, by closeness and separation, creation and cruelty. Chaos had opened the way, but it was Gaia who held everything within herself. The bond between earth and sky was the universe's first marriage. It was not a choice, but a necessity. Each night, Uranus covered Gaia with the stars, never seeing her pain. This union brought powerful children, but also deep sorrow. Uranus feared what he had created. Instead of wonder, he saw a threat, and again buried his children within Gaia. At last, Gaia could endure no more. From her own body, she created a weapon older than metal itself, a sharp flint sickle. She turned to her Titan sons and told them of her pain. All of them stepped back in fear. Only the youngest, Cronus, stepped forward. "I will do it," he said. And when Uranus descended into darkness one final time, Cronus emerged from the shadows and brought the blade down. When the blade fell, the sky shook with Uranus's scream. Cronus cast what remained into the sea, and from the pale foam upon the waves, a new power was born. From that full Aphrodite Hose, a beauty beyond description, both gentle and dangerous. She emerged slowly upon the shores of Cyprus, glowing with light. Born of violence, yet untouched by it. Love came into the world, not quietly, but through destruction. But Gaia's vengeance did not end there. From the blood that fell upon the earth were born the spirits of vengeance, who would hunt oathbreakers forever, the giants, who would one day rise against the gods, and the Malaya nymphs of the ash trees, guardians of the old order. Wounded and dethroned, Uranus withdrew into the heavens. Before leaving, he spoke one final prophecy. My son has overthrown me. He too will be overthrown by his own son. Cronus never forgot those words. He took the throne of the sky, but fear ascended with him. Thus ended the age of Uranus, and the era of the Titans began. Yet even now, the shadow of a coming storm loomed. When the sky withdrew from the earth, the world took its first deep breath. The Titans stood freely at last, and the youngest among them, Cronus, became their ruler. He was not cruel, but he was cautious, and he never forgot the prophecy. The blade that had overthrown his father was hidden. It could not be seen, but it was never forgotten. Cronus had freed his mother, had released his siblings. Yet in his mind lived a single fear, that one day his own child would do the same to him. For this reason, he married Rhea, his gentle, wise sister. Together they ruled over an age later called the Golden Age. Humans knew no suffering. The earth bore fruit on its own. There was no war, no wars, no locked doors. But peace never lasts forever. And when Rhea began to bear children, Cronus remembered his father's curse once more, and he did not hesitate. When Rhea handed her newborn into Cronus's arms, the same thing happened. He opened his mouth without hesitation and swallowed the child whole. Ischia, Demeter, Hera, Hydas, Poseidon. Without a thought, he opened his mouth and swallowed them all. No scream remained. No empty cradle. They vanished into darkness like seeds buried beneath winter soil. Cronus believed it was necessary. He would not suffer Uranus's fate. The throne had to be protected. Rhea wept, but tears held no power against fear. She bore 5 children. She lost all 5. But with the 6th, she made her choice. When the child stirred within her womb, she fled to Crete, to a place where mountains touched the sky and caves opened deep into the earth. There, among shepherds and nymphs, she gave birth to Zeus. From the very first moment, she knew he was different. His cry shook the trees. His eyes opened with awareness. When he grasped her finger, it felt as though fate itself had touched her. To deceive Cronus, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and gave it to him. Cronus swallowed it without question. He believed the danger had passed. Meanwhile, Zeus was raised in secret beneath Mount Ida. The Curates clashed their shields to hide his cries. The milk of the goat Amalthea granted him extraordinary strength. As Zeus grew, so did the approaching storm, for now Cronus ruled. The sky was high. The earth was green. The Titans were comfortable upon their thrones. But within Cronus, 5 children stirred in darkness, and far away, a hidden child gazed at the stars and waited. In the hidden folds of Mount Ida, where the air thins and the wind whispers ancient names through pines and stone, Zeus grew, far from his father's sight. He learned not from books, but from silence, from whispers by the fire, and from the patience of the mountains. From the moment of his birth, Zeus drank the milk of the divine goat. From her broken horn was born the cornucopia, the symbol of abundance. When Amalthea died, Zeus placed her among the stars, making her a part of the sky he would one day rule. But Zeus was not born for solitude. Fate flowed through his blood. Rebellion was etched into his bones. As Zeus grew, Gaia stirred once more. She remembered Cronus's betrayal, the imprisoned children, the Cyclopes, and the 100-handed ones buried in Tartarus. Vengeance had not ended, it had only waited. Gaia whispered into Zeus's dreams. While awake, she guided his steps. First, she led him to Metis, the goddess of wisdom. Together with clever farcing Metis, Zeus devised a plan to defeat Cronus. Strength would not be enough. Deception was required. Disguised, Zeus returned to his father. There, he offered a potion sweet, as honey bitter beneath. The potion worked. Cronus convulsed and released the children he had swallowed years before. But not as infants, as gods in their full power. Hestia, goddess of the hearth. Demeter, mistress of grain. Hera, proud and fierce. Hades, lord of the dead. Poseidon, ruler of the seas. For the first time, they stood together and looked upon the throne that had cast them into darkness. They would not forget. But Cronus was not alone. The Titans gathered around him. They took their stand on mighty Mount Olympus. Oceanus stayed out of the war too old or too wise. The others armed themselves. And so began the war that poets would call the war between the Titans and the Olympians tore apart sky and earth. It raged without pause for 10 long years. Storms smothered the heavens. Mountains split with fire. And the young world watched in silence as its masters fought for dominion. The Titans held the ancient Mount Olympus. Zeus and his siblings stood their ground on Olympus, still untouched by war. Lightning tore through the sky. Seas rose and swallowed islands. Volcanoes spewed fire. Winds howled, yet neither side could strike the final blow. The war was locked in stalemate until Gaia spoke. The key to victory had been buried long ago. She told Zeus to descend into Tartarus and free the Cyclopes and the 100-handed ones whom Cronus had chained in fear. Zeus, with his siblings, shattered the gates of the underworld and set them free. The Cyclopes were grateful. They gave Zeus the weapon of lightning. To Poseidon, the trident that would rule the seas. To Hades, the dark helm that rendered him invisible. When the 100-handed ones joined the war, everything changed. They hurled mountains like stones and crushed the Titans beneath them. The balance was broken. The Olympians surged forward. Cronus fought with pride to the very end. But prophecy is merciless. The Titans fell one by one. They were not killed. They were cast down. Zeus did what his father once had done. He chained them in the deepest depths of Tartarus. The defeated Titans were bound with chains forged by the 100-handed ones. They were sealed behind bronze gates that would never rust and never break. Only a few escaped this fate. Prometheus and Epimetheus, who chose the side of the gods, and Theseus, who foresaw that Zeus would bring justice. Thus the age of the Titans came to an end. At last, the sky cleared. The world, scorched by war, slowly began to heal. The throne passed to Zeus, not by blood, but by strength, by intellect, and by destiny taking its rightful place. Yet the curse of Cronus still lingered like an echo. For power once seized must always be defended. No ruler, god or mortal, is ever truly safe forever. When the war ended, silence returned beneath the sky. The victors stood among the ruins of creation, while the Titans groaned in the depths of Tartarus. Their voices vanished into a darkness that gave no echo. The old order had fallen, but the true challenge was only beginning. War is won with fire. To rule requires patience, justice, and balance. The world was vast, wild, and still filled with nameless forces. It could not be held by a single hand. At the center of this new age stood Zeus. Not the firstborn, but the strongest, the most cunning, and when action was required, always the first to step forward. But the oldest laws of the universe, not carved into stone, but etched into existence itself, did not allow Zeus to rule alone, for he had two brothers hardened by war. each having claimed their own power. One was Poseidon, he who whipped the seas into fury, who raised waves in anger. The other was Hades, wearing the helm of darkness, moving unseen, walking silently through battlefields and the depths of the underworld. They too had fought. They too had shed blood. They too had suffered losses. The throne of the cosmos could not belong to Zeus alone. Otherwise, the seed of a new war would be planted, this time between brothers. And so the three came together: Zeus, Poseidon, Hades. They chose not power, but Phaeaci. They drew lots to divide the world. This was no game. It was a sacred moment. The same unseen force that guided the Titan War ruled here as well. They cast the bones, and they waited. In the end, the world was divided into three great dominions. The sky fell to Zeus. Endless heavens, the space between mountains and stars. Zeus was now the Lord of lightning and rain, the master of storms and clouds, and the undisputed king of Olympus. Zeus's voice echoed through the heavens like thunder itself. His anger struck as lightning, and the eagles circled the skies as his sacred symbol. The seas were given to Poseidon, deep, restless, and filled with mystery. He ruled the oceans, the rivers, and every spring that burst from the earth. With his trident, he could shatter stone, calm the waves, or raise them in fury beneath the surf in a palace of coral and gold. He ruled not only the waters, but creatures older than time itself. The underworld fell to Hades. It was not a prize anyone desired, yet he accepted it in silence, in this realm where sunlight never reached. He ruled with justice and cold resolve, Lord of the dead, Judge of souls, guardian of the riches beneath the earth. Mortals feared him, spoke his name only in whispers. Yet Hades never broke a promise he made. The surface world remained shared. The mountains belonged to no one. On the plains, mortals and spirits walked side by side. Forests grew freely. It was a realm where gods could walk, and fate worked silently. A land between all worlds. Sky, sea, and underworld were balanced. The three brothers swore never to wage war against one another, for such a war would tear the world apart once more. At the peak of Mount Olympus, Zeus gathered the gods. Beside him stood his sisters, proud and shod Hera, Demeter, harbinger of spring, and Hestia, keeper of the sacred hearth. Then the others arrived. Athena, goddess of wisdom and war. Golden Leech, Apollo, silent and swift Artemis. Ares, with bloodied hands. Quick-witted Hermes, limping yet unmatched craftsman, and Aphrodite, whose smile could unravel kings. Thus, a new age began, the age of Olympus. But the world would not grow calm. The gods were powerful, yet not free from pride, love, or rage. And rising upon the earth, mortals would bring their own stories, their own wars, and their own suffering. The heavens had been won. But when gods take the throne, peace never comes suddenly. When the smoke of war dispersed and the world was once again lit by the sun, Mount Olympus became the heart of the new order. The Titans had ruled from Mount Othrys in the south, a harsh, ancient place, surrounded by storms. Olympus, however, stood higher, its peak crowned with clouds and legends. This was not merely a mountain, it was a threshold, a place where stone and sky met, where the mortal world ended in silence. Here, Zeus gathered the new council of gods. Olympus was unlike human kingdoms. There were no roads leading to its gates, no guards, no walls, no armies. The gods had no need for such things. Their boundary was the air itself, the height where mortal breath could no longer reach. There was no decay on Olympus. Snow never fell. Storms could not take hold. Its halls were made of marble and cloud, its ceilings woven with starlight. In its wide corridors, the wind moved freely, and the gods walked in their true forms. Radiant, terrifying, and more alive than anything on earth. At the summit stood Zeus, king of gods and men. He sat upon a throne made of thunder. No one could rival his power. Yet he ruled not by strength alone, but by fate and the lessons taught by war. His voice was like a distant storm. His gaze pierced time and cloud alike. In his hand, he held the lightning bolt, gifted by the Cyclopes, a symbol of swift and final judgment. Yet even Zeus was not alone. Around him stood the others. It's one, a pillar holding up the new order of the world. Hera sat beside Zeus, not merely as his wife, but as a queen in her own right. She was the goddess of marriage, sovereignty, and childbirth. Within her, she carried a silent yet burning fury, proud, unyielding. She never forgot an injustice. Her jealousy would, in time, shape the fates of gods and mortals alike. Her crown was not given to her. It was earned through loyalty, pain, and sacred oaths. Then came Demeter, goddess of earth and abundance. Where her feet touched the ground, the soil softened and seeds awakened. Rather than sitting in the halls of Olympus, she often wandered the mortal world, watching over farmers and mothers whispering morning prayers. She was quiet, ancient, and her power unquestionable. Without her, the world would starve. Then there was Hestia, silent and constant, the first child of Cronus and Rhea, yet the last to be saved. She asked for no temple, no legend, no war or love. She guarded the sacred flame of Olympus and lived in every hearth burning in mortal homes. Her power was gentle, but it was always there. In time, the younger gods arrived. The first was Athena, born not from a womb, but from wisdom itself. When Zeus swallowed Metis, he believed the danger had passed. But wisdom never dies. One day Zeus cried out in agony, and Athena burst forth from his head. Armored, spear in hand, she became the goddess of wisdom, strategy, and just war. Then the twins were born. Apollo and Artemis, their mother Leto, fleeing Hera's wrath, found no land willing to shelter her until the floating island of Delos accepted her. Apollo was golden-haired, god of light, music, prophecy, and healing. Artemis was swift and silver, goddess of the hunt, the wild, and moonlight. They strengthened the bond between gods and mortals. Then came Hades, the bloody face of war, powerful, yet uncontrolled. He loved chaos, but often fell to reason and strategy. His opposite was Hephaestus, lame yet brilliant, master of fire and iron, the god who forged beauty from pain. The birth of Hephaestus is told in two different ways. Either he was born from Hera alone, or he was cast down from Olympus by Zeus, whichever is true. He found solace in fire and iron. With his hammer, he created wonders. Invincible armor, moving palaces, living bronze machines. His body was twisted, his walk uneven. Yet among the gods there was none who could do without him. He was the one who understood creation best. Aphrodite, however, did not arrive through birth, where the blood of Uranus mixed with the sea. She rose from the foam when she appeared on the shores of Cyprus. She was as dangerous as she was beautiful. She was the goddess of beauty and desire. Wherever she went, love followed, but often alongside jealousy and destruction. Even Zeus, could not fully control her. With a single glance, she bound gods and mortals alike. Her smile was sweet, but never without a cost. Finally came Hermes, swift, clever, and mischievous. He was the son of Zeus and Maia. With his winged sandals, he moved easily between worlds. On the very day he was born, he stole Apollo's cattle, then sang so beautifully that his theft was turned into forgiveness. He became the messenger of the gods, guide of souls, protector of travelers and thieves. Where Hermes passed, rules bent and boundaries blurred. This was the palace of Olympus, not a place of saints, but of powers gathered together. Raw, flawed, radiant, and colossal, the gods argued like siblings, interfered in the lives of mortals, fell in love, betrayed one another, and enforced their own justice. From Olympus, they watched the world, sometimes shaping fate with nothing more than a glance. The age of Titans had ended, but in its place came an age where gods walked among humans. Heroes were born, and peace could shatter at any moment. Fate, however, had not yet spoken its final word. Long before humans built cities, before prayers were carved into stone, there were no humans on the earth at all, while the gods ruled above. The world below was wild and silent. Forests were free, animals fearless, and mountains did not speak. There were no hands to till the soil, no fire to warm the night, no voices singing to the stars. Prometheus was the first to imagine the shape of humankind. He was of the old Titan blood, but he did not stand beside Cronus, nor was he among those chained in Tartarus. In the Titan War, he chose Zeus's side, not out of loyalty, but foresight. For Prometheus could see the future. His name meant the one who thinks ahead, and it suited him well. His brother Epimetheus was the opposite, one who thinks after the fact. Epimetheus acted in haste and regretted it later. Prometheus, on the other hand, would stop, question, and even silently weigh the decisions of Zeus himself, the king of the gods. Prometheus stood between two worlds, between the Titans and the Olympians, between the old age and the new, in a universe ruled by power and desire. What guided him was reason and thought. It was Prometheus who created the first humans. Some say he shaped them from clay by a riverbank, forming limbs with his hands and given them life with his breath. Others tell that he made humans in the image of the gods, upright beings, capable of thought and creation. Either way, the first humans were weak. They had no claws, no fangs, no fur, and no knowledge of fire, naked beneath the sky, shivering in winter, fleeing from wild beasts. They were fragile beings. Prometheus saw them and felt pity. He ascended to Olympus and asked for a gift for humanity, something that would allow them to survive, something that would separate them from animals, but Zeus did not allow it. Zeus saw not hope in mortals, but danger. He had only just seized the throne, and a new power growing beneath him made him uneasy. "Let them live," he said, "but let them know fear." Fire belonged to the gods. The hearth of Hestia, the forge of Hephaestus, the lightning of Zeus. These were not meant for human hands, but Prometheus did not submit. He slipped secretly into Olympus, stole a spark from the forge of Hephaestus, and hid it inside a hollow fennel stalk. Then he carried fire down to mankind. For the first time, fire burned beneath the stars. Darkness retreated. Warmth, safety, cooked food, tools, and craft were born. Humanity began to build, and learned to question as well. Zeus soon noticed the theft. His wrath was merciless. To punish mankind, he ordered the gods to fashion a gift, but this gift was a curse. Hephaestus shaped her from clay, a flawless woman. Aphrodite gave her beauty. Hermes gave her cunning, and Athena clothed her in shimmering garments. Her name was Pandora, meaning the one who carries all gifts, and with her she brought what was later mistakenly called a box, but was in truth a jar. Inside it lay all the troubles of the world. This is toil, grief, jealousy, madness, and death. Epimetheus, as always, acted without thinking. Despite Prometheus' warnings, he welcomed Pandora into his home. And Pandora, driven by the final gift of the god's curiosity, opened the jar. The evil spread into the world like smoke from a fire long imprisoned. The brief age of peace for humanity ended. Hunger be gone! War arrived. Old age bent shoulders. Fate began to openly hunt mankind. Only hope remained inside the jar. Some say it was by chance. Others that it was left there on purpose. A small light, trembling in the dark. But Prometheus' punishment had not yet begun. For defying Olympus, Zeus chained him to a mountain at the edge of the world. He was bound with unbreakable bonds. Each day, an eagle came and tore at his liver. Each night the organ grew back, and each morning the torment began again. He was immortal, and so the pain could not kill him as kingdoms rose and fell. Even as humans forgot the names of gods, he endured, and even in chains, he did not regret his choice, for he knew a secret Zeus feared most, that the king of the gods would one day fall, not by sword, but by one of his own blood. Zeus could not destroy Prometheus without first learning this secret. And so the Titan waited and bought while humans lit fires in the dark, telling stories of the one who stole flame from the gods. The world was not shaped by gods alone. Beneath Olympus, in the soil, those who felt the sun drank the rain. Humans struggled, Hosea, and fell again. Their lives were short, but their marks were deep. Zeus ruled the skies, Poseidon the seas, but it was human actions that filled the earth with beauty and sorrow. When later poets looked back on this long path, they saw not one humanity, but many ages, each shaped by divine favor and punishment. The first to put these ages into words was the farmer poet Hesiod. He divided human history into 5 distinct ages: gold, silver, bronze, heroes, and iron. There were 5 ages of humanity, each weaker than the one before it, with a single exception. The first age was the Golden Age. It resembled no time that followed. In this era, ruled by Cronus, the gods did not yet fear rebellion, and the world knew neither ire nor war. Humans lived almost like gods. There was no pain, no disease, no hunger. Old age did not bend their bodies, and they did not need to work. The earth gave fruit on its own, in every season. There was no need for laws, no need for swords, no need for kings or money. Life existed in quiet harmony, and when death came, it was painless, like falling asleep. Their souls did not vanish. They remained in the world. They became benevolent spirits, guardians of justice and peace. This was the time when humanity stood closest to heaven. But even golden ages do not last forever. With the fall of Cronus and the rise of Zeus, the Silver Age began. These humans were strong in body, long-lived, but weaker in spirit. They remained children for 100 years, spoiled and ignorant. When they finally grew, they were filled not with wisdom, but with arrogance. They showed no respect for the gods and ignored sacred laws. They had strength, but were hollow within, and the gods noticed. They did not build temples. They offered no sacrifices. They mocked the laws of Olympus. They did not fear the gods, and Zeus destroyed them. When they died, their souls became neither guardians nor watchers. They descended quietly into the underworld, pale, nameless, and forgotten. They were a race destroyed by arrogance, proof that the gods' fears had not been unfounded. Then came the Bronze Age, a generation born of ash trees, the very trees from which spears and shields were made. These were not gentle people. They were made for war, strong, ruthless, unstoppable. It was said even their flesh was bronze. Their houses were bronze. Their weapons were bronze. Even their hearts seemed forged from the same metal. They lived for war. They died in war. Behind them, the world was covered in blood and ash. Yet they were not evil, only surrendered to the rhythm of war, to the beat of drums, to the echo of clashing weapons. They built no cities. They wrote no poetry. They carved no statues. When they vanished, not even the gods mourned. Without prayers, without memory, they descended into Hades. All that remained were broken swords and empty, a silent world left behind. But not every fall moves in a straight line. From the blood and smoke of the Bronze Age, a brief yet dazzling light rose, the Age of Heroes. This age was not part of the decline. It was a pause, the last brilliance shining before the final collapse. The people of this age were different, greater than those before them, and greater than those who would come after. They were demigods, children of gods and humans. They built cities never seen before. They crossed seas no one had dared, and they carved their names into the memory of the world. This was the age of Perseus and Heracles, of Theseus and Atalanta, of Jason and the Argonauts, of Hector, Achilles, and Odysseus. They fought monsters born of nightmares, foreign kings, and finally each other in the great and terrible war of Troy. Many died young. Many more faded into obscurity, but their stories did not die. They lived on in songs, were carved into stone, told in epics beside the fire, and whispered in prayers. Even centuries later, some were granted a rare reward: the Blessed Isles, beyond the oceans, where heroes live in peace under an eternal sun. The Age of Heroes did not last long, but while it burned, it lit the world. And then came the era Hesiod called his own, the Iron Age, the age we still live in, a heavy time, a tired world. People now work from sunrise until the darkness of night. They sow seeds into barren soil, raise children under the shadow of war and famine, and grow old with pain and fear. In this age, bonds break easily between friends, between relatives, even between guest and hosts. Justice still exists, but it no longer looks us in the eye. Oaths are cheap, lies are plentiful, and the gods, if they are still watching, they watch in silence. People build towers but forget their ancestors, chasing gold and power. They destroy the forests that once fed them. This is an age of struggle, and according to Hesiod, it will not last forever. One day the gods will turn away completely. One day Zeus will hurl his lightning to the earth, and humanity will scatter like smoke in the wind. But the Iron Age still continues. People still build, istuhopi, and still tell stories of the days when humans were like gold, and gods walked among them. Perhaps when Pandora opened the jar, the one thing Zeus did not take back was this Hopi in that pale light between the age of gods and the age of humans. Another race emerged, neither fully human nor fully divine. These were the heroes. Their lives were short, their fates were cruel, but their names echoed through time like distant thunder. One of the first and greatest was Perseus, slayer of monsters, ancestor of kings, and forerunner of all heroes. His story does not begin with a war, but with a prophecy. His mother was Dano, princess of Argos. His father was King Achilles, and like many kings, he feared what he could not control. A prophecy foretold that Danae's son would one day kill him. In myths, prophecies do not bargain, and Achilles did what fearful kings so often do. He tried to destroy the source of fate itself. Achilles locked Danae underground in a bronze tower. It was sealed off from time and from people, but the gods always mocked the precautions taken by mortals. Zeus came to her not as a man, but as golden rain. No wall could stop him, and thus Perseus's fate was written before he was even born. When Achilles learned of the child, he was afraid. He did not dare to spill royal blood. He feared the wrath of the gods, so he placed Danae and her baby into a wooden chest and cast them into the sea. He left the decision to fate or to Poseidon. But the sea had a different plan. The chest drifted to the island of Sea. A fisherman named Dictys found it and took them in. He raised Perseus as his own son. As the child grew, he became strong. There was a storm in his gaze and destiny in his stance. But for those who live with fate, peace never lasts long. The island's king, Polydex, desired Danae. Perseus stood before his mother. He did not step aside. Unable to kill him openly, the king turned to cunning. He announced a false wedding and demanded gifts from everyone. Perseus made a reckless vow. "I will bring you the head of Medusa," he said. It was a death sentence, but the gods stood behind Perseus. Athena gave him her shield, polished like a mirror. Hermes offered his sword, his winged sandals, and guidance for the road. Perseus stole the single eye of the Greek sisters and forced knowledge from them. From the nymphs, he obtained sacred items, Hades' helmet of invisibility, and a magical bag to carry the head at the edge of the world, where night never ended. He found the Gorgons asleep, looking only at Athena's shield. He severed Medusa's head in a single strike. From her blood were born Pegasus and Chryso. As her sisters screamed, Perseus vanished unseen and escaped. On his return journey, he saved Andromeda, turned the sea monster to stone, and married her. When he returned to Seriphos, Polydex mocked him. Perseus opened the bag. The king in his palace turned to stone, and the kind fisherman who once pulled a chest from the sea, Dictys, became king. The cycle of cruelty seemed broken, but once a prophecy is spoken, it cannot be taken back. Perseus returned to Argos. King Achilles, still haunted by the prophecy, avoided facing his grandson. But fate does not forget. At the funeral games of a neighboring king, Perseus took part in the competitions. As he hurled a discus, the flying disc struck an elderly man in the crowd. That man was Achilles. He died unknowingly, not by murder, but by the fulfillment of a prophecy spoken years before. This is how cycles close in myth. Perseus had not wished to spill blood. He had slain monsters. saved the innocent, and founded kingdoms. He carried fate quietly. He was mortal, but his name would endure. For from his bloodline would be born Heracles, and the story of gods and men would open a new page. If Perseus was the first great hero, Heracles was the mightiest. His name was like thunder echoing through distant mountains, not merely strong, but destructive like nature itself. He was Perseus' descendant, born in Argos and the son of Zeus. The gods granted him limitless strength, but in return gifted him unbearable pain. Even his birth was born of deception. Zeus desired Alcmene. He took the form of her husband and stretched one night into three. From that night, Heracles was born. From her true husband, the mortal twin Iphicles, Hera watched everything. She knew this demigod would one day threaten her power. While he was still in the cradle, she sent 2 serpents, but Heracles, with a serpent in each hand, strangled them both. His legend began at that moment. In his youth, he learned music, archery, combat, and war. But within him lived a savagery that could not be restrained. In adulthood, he tasted both love and destruction. He married Megara. They had children. He defended Thebes. But Hera did not forgive. With divine fury, she clouded Heracles' mind. And Heracles, with his own hands, killed his wife and children. When the madness passed, he looked upon a home filled with blood and silence. He cried out to the gods. No answer came. For atonement, Heracles went to Delphi. The oracle Pythia spoke in riddles, but the message was clear. Heracles would enter the service of his cousin Eurystheus, the king of He was weak, but his fate was great. Only through humiliation, suffering, and obedience could he be purified. Thus began the 12 labors. Deeds so terrible, so vast, that even the gods watched in silence. The Nemean lion, whose hide could not be pierced by any weapon. Heracles cornered it in a cave and strangled it with his bare hands. Using the lion's own claw, he skinned it and wore the hide as armor. The Lernaean Hydra with 9 heads. For every head cut off, 2 more grew back. His nephew Iolace helped by searing the necks. From the immortal head, Heracles took poison and dipped his arrows in it. The golden horned deer sacred to Artemis. He pursued it for an entire year. He captured it without taking its life. He earned the goddess Essie reluctant respect. The Erymanthian boar. He fought it in snowy mountains, bound it in chains, and brought it to you. The king hid in a bronze jar in terror. The most humiliating of all, the stables of Augeas. Heracles redirected 2 rivers and cleansed the filth in a single day. The Stymphalian birds, bronze-beaked, and with Athena's help, he drove them into the air and struck them down with his arrows. The Cretan bull, father of the Minotaur, he subdued the raging beast and brought it back alive. The horses of Diomedes, fed on human flesh. The solution was simple. He fed them their master, the belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. She was willing to give it peacefully, but Hera sowed discord. War broke out. Hippolyta died. The cattle of Geryon, the 3-bodied giant at the edge of the world. Here, Heracles raised the pillars of Hercules at the Strait of Gibraltar. But Eurystheus declared 2 labors invalid. He demanded 2 more. The golden apples of the Hesperides. He tricked Atlas into holding the sky and escaped with the apples to descend into the underworld, to bring back Cerberus, the 3-headed dog. Heracles succeeded. His atonement was complete, but peace did not come. What killed him was not a monster, but the poisoned blood of Nessus. His wife Deianira believed it to be a love charm, in flames. He built his own funeral pyre. Only Philoctetes lit the fire. As a reward, he received the body. Heracles burned, but he did not die. Zeus took him to Olympus, granted him immortality, married him to Hebe, no longer a hero, but a god. Theseus had two fathers, Aegeus, king of Athens, and Poseidon, god of the sea. His mother Ithra lay with two men on the same night, one mortal, one divine. From this dual union, a child shaped by destiny was born. Theseus grew up far from Athens. Before leaving, Aegeus hid a sword and a pair of sandals beneath a massive rock. The day he can lift the stone, he said, my son will be ready. Years passed. Theseus became tall, sharpened, and restless. At 16, he lifted the stone and claimed the items. Most chose the sea route. Theseus chose the road because he believed a kingdom should be earned by cost, not inherited. Thus began the 6 labors of Theseus. Not divine trials, but tests filled with human fears. He defeated Periphetes and took his club. He killed Sinis, the brute who tore travelers apart between pine trees. He hurled Siren from the cliff into the sea. He defeated Cercyon. With skill, he killed Procrustes in his own bed. Theseus did more than survive. He cleansed the land. He opened the road. When he reached Athens, Aegeus did not recognize him. Queen Medea sensed the danger and offered poison. But Theseus revealed the sword and sandals. Aegeus struck the cup away and embraced his son. Joy was brief. Athens had long paid tribute to Crete. Every 9 years, 7 youths and 7 maidens were sent to the Minotaur. The monster was born from Minos' arrogance. When he failed to sacrifice the bull sent by Poseidon, the gods cursed his wife. The result? Asterion. Half man, half bull. He was locked within the labyrinth of Daedalus. Theseus volunteered. He went not as prey, but as hunter. He promised his father white sails. If he lived, black. If he died, in Crete, fate turned. Ariadne fell in love with Theseus. She gave him a ball of thread. Theseus entered the labyrinth. He faced the monster in the dark. A silent fight. A nightmare. He returned by following the thread. But on Naxos, he left Ariadne behind. Some say Dionysus claimed her. Some say Theseus was afraid. Ariadne woke alone. On the return voyage, Theseus forgot to change the sails. Aegeus saw the black sails and threw himself into the sea. That sea still bears his name, the Aegean. Theseus became king. He unified Attica, created laws, began festivals. He was a warrior, but also a founder. He descended into the underworld. He fought the Amazons. Heracles rescued him. In the end, he was exiled. On Scaros, he was thrown from a cliff. But his legacy lived on. If Heracles embodied the body, Theseus embodied the city. And now, the story of Jason and the Golden Fleece is about to begin. Jason's story began in the city of Iolcos. In Thessaly, his father Aeson was the rightful king, but his brother Peleus, a man who believed power was the only law, seized the throne by force. Fearing the child yet to be born, Peleus ordered Jason's death. Hezon learned of this in time. The infant was smuggled out of the palace and entrusted to the wise centaur Chiron. Raised by the same teacher who trained Achilles and Jason grew up in the wilderness. Hunting hardened his body. Songs and teachings sharpened his mind. Years later, Jason returned. He wore only one sandal. While crossing the river Anores, he had carried an old woman on his back and lost his sandal in the current. The woman was Hera in disguise. When Peleus saw him, his face drained of color. The prophecy was clear. Beware the man with one sandal. Jason did not draw his sword. He introduced himself, the son of Aeson. Peleus chose deceit. "Bring me the golden fleece," he said, "and the throne will be yours." The golden fleece hung in Chalcis upon a sacred tree, guarded by a sleepless serpent. Its owner was Ates, son of the sun god. Jason accepted. The greatest heroes gathered: Heracles, Orpheus, Atalanta, Castor, and Polydeuces. They set sail aboard the Argo. At its prow stood a sacred oak that could speak. The voyage cut through legends. Lemnos, the land of women. Thrace, the blind seer. Phineus, the clashing rocks. At last, they reached Ates gave Jason impossible tasks, but Medea, at Hera's command, fell in love with Jason. She gave him magic. She taught him deceit. She put the serpent to sleep. Jason took the golden fleece. They fled. Medea killed her brother. She bought time with blood. When they returned to Iolcus, Peleus broke his word. Medea had him torn apart. The people rose in revolt. Jason was driven into exile. In Corinth, Jason abandoned Medea. Medea answered. She burned the bride. She killed their children and rose into the sky. In a chariot drawn by dragons, Jason was left behind. Throneless, familyless, a legend, but broken. Jason returned to Iolcos a broken man. In his final years, he wandered among ruins. The hero once pursued by glory was now forgotten. One day, while resting beneath the Argo, the rotting, abandoned ship, a loosened beam broke free and fell upon his head. This is how Jason died. Not invicto, not in victory, but in silence, crushed beneath the wreckage of his own past. But his story lived on. The quest for the golden fleece, the union of heroes, love turning into betrayal. In Jason, Greek myth saw this truth. Ambition lifts a man, but it always demands a price. In Greek mythology, no bloodline is as cursed as that of the kings of Thebes. While other heroes fought monsters, the kings of Thebes fought their own blood. Even the city's foundation was laid with blood and prophecy. It all began with Cadmus, a Phoenician, Prince brother of Europa. He searched for a sister abducted by Zeus. When he could not find her, he went to the oracle of Delphi. The god's answer was clear. Stop searching. Follow where it lies down. Build your city. Cadmus obeyed. When his men searched for water, they were killed by a serpent sacred to Ares. Cadmus slew the serpent and sowed its teeth into the earth. From the soil rose armored waters there. They killed one another. 5 remained. They became the nobles of Thebes. But killing the serpent of Ares had a price. Cadmus served Ares for 8 years. Then he married Harmonia. The gods attended the wedding. Among the gifts was a necklace forged by him. Beautiful, but cursed. The fate of Thebes was sealed there. For generations, disaster followed. A daughter went mad and threw her child into the sea. A grandson was torn apart by his own dogs. Semele burned to death when she asked to see Zeus's true form. Agave, driven mad by tore her son apart, believing him to be a lion. But the greatest tragedy came later. Laius, king of Thebes, received a prophecy. If you have a son, he will kill you and marry his mother. He ignored the warning. When the child was born, his feet were pierced and he was left on Mount Cytherid. But the infant did not die, passed from hand to hand. He was adopted by the king of Corinth. His name was Oedipus. Swollen foot, he grew up unaware of the truth. One day, rumors reached his ears. He went to the oracle. He heard the same fate, believing he was protecting his parents. He fled Corinth, but in truth, he was running straight toward his fate. At a crossroads, he quarreled with an old man and killed him. That man was his father. Laius, when Oedipus reached Thebes, the city was cursed by the Sphinx. The riddle was asked, what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? The answer was clear. Mun. The Sphinx threw herself down. The people rejoiced. Oedipus became king and married the widowed Queen Jocasta, his mother. Years passed. They had 4 children, Eteocles, Polynices, Antigone, Then the plague came. The oracle spoke again. Thebes was cursed because spilled blood had gone unpunished. The truth unraveled slowly, mercilessly. The old man at the crossroads, the queen's fear, the wounded feet, the surviving servant, and the blind seer, the man who said the king was both son and husband, both father and brother. Jocasta could not endure it. She hanged herself. Oedipus, standing on the edge of madness, tore the brooches from her dress and drove them into his eyes. Sight had brought him nothing but ruin. Blind and broken, he asked for exile. Only Antigone remained at his side. At Colonus, the earth received him. He died quietly. His grave was hidden by the gods, a mercy he had never known in life. But the curse did not end with him. His sons, Eteocles and Polynices, fought for the throne. Polynices was exiled and returned with an Argive army. The War of the Seven against Thebes began. The brothers killed one another at the gates. The city stood. Its soul could not bear it. Antigone, the last honorable soul, buried her brother despite the royal decree. The price was being buried alive. The god sent madness and death into the house of Creon. The story of Oedipus is not a story of victory. It is the story of fate. A man fleeing a prophecy, only to walk step by step into it. No riddle, no matter how clever, can change the will of the gods. Among all the wars fought by mortals, none echoed as loudly as the war fought for the face of a woman. It all began with a wedding. All the gods were invited to the wedding of Peleus and Theseus. All but one goddess, Eris, goddess of discord. In fury, she cast a golden apple. Upon it were 3 words: "To the fairest." Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite claimed the apple. They chose a mortal judge. Paris, Prince of Troy, raised as a shepherd because of a prophecy that he would one day destroy the city. On Mount Ida, offers were made. Hera offered power. Athena offered wisdom and victory. Aphrodite offered love, the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose love. And Helen, wife of Menelaus, became the target of fate. Whether she went willingly or was taken by force, poets still argue. But when Paris returned to Troy, Helen was beside him. The war began at that moment. Menelaus called upon the oath sworn for Helen. All answered. Odysseus, unwillingly. Nestor, wise. Ajax, towering. Diomedes, ruthless. From every corner of Greece, kings came. 2 resisted Odysseus' feigned madness until a baby was placed before his plow. Achilles was hidden among maidens by his mother until he reached for a spear. The fleet gathered at Aulis, 1,000 ships. But the winds did not blow. The seers said Artemis was angered. The price was clear. Iphigenia, daughter of Agamemnon. Some say she was saved. In most tellings, the blade fell, and the gods watched as the king sacrificed his child. What? The winds finally blew. The fleet sailed east. The world changed. The Greeks set foot on Trojan land not as raiders, but as judgment. Before them stood Ilion, ruled by Priam. Defending it were his sons. Hector noble and walking toward his fate. Paris, beautiful yet weak, and many others. The gods took sides. Hera, Athena, and Poseidon favored the Greeks. Aphrodite, Eris, Apollo, and Artemis protected the Trojans. Zeus tried to remain neutral, but even he bent beneath fate. This was not yet Homer's Iliad. That story begins in the 10th year, but the war had already been born. In broken oaths, in sacrificed daughters, in wounded pride, in the rivalries of gods. Its end would not be victory. Its end would be fire. When the Iliad begins, the war had dragged on for 9 years. Rage had given way to endurance. The Greeks built dark camps along the shore, dragged their ships onto the sand, and survived through plunder. The war deepened like a wound that would not heal. Behind walls woven by the gods, Troy endured. The fields were ash. Allies came from distant lands. Sarpedon from Lycia, Memnon from Ethiopia. The Greeks remained, not only for Helen, but for pride. Oaths bound them. Inheritance became chains. And at the center of everything stood 2 men. Agamemnon, king of kings, and Achilles, son of Theseus, invincible, young, doomed to die, and determined to make his name immortal. The quarrel shattered the Greeks. As always, it began with a woman. From a raid, 2 captives were taken. Chrysis, daughter of Apollo's priest, to Agamemnon. Briseis, to Achilles. When the father came with ransom, Agamemnon humiliated him. Apollo answered, not with lightning, but with plague. The seer Calchas revealed the truth. Agamemnon returned the girl, but took Briseis from Achilles. This was unforgivable. Achilles swore before the gods he would fight no more. He withdrew to his tent. The Myrmidons withdrew with him. From that moment on, everything turned against the Greeks. Without Achilles, the Greeks fled. Hector, fighting as a prince of duty, drove them toward the sea. Husband, father, the heart of the city. Day by day they were forced toward the ships. Ships burned. Heroes fell. As despair grew, Achilles' closest companion could no longer remain silent. Friend or lover, the songs differ, but all agree he was the only one who could reach Achilles. He begged to fight in his place. He and Achilles' armor led the Myrmidons, turned the tide, but went too far. At the gates of Troy, he met the clash was brief and brutal. Patroclus fell beneath Hector's spear, and with him, the last bond in Achilles' heart was severed. When the news came, Achilles did not weep. He screamed like a storm. His mother Thetis brought him new armor, forged by heated bronze, shining like the sun, a shield that carried the story of the world. Then Achilles returned to battle. Men fell like harvested grain. Rivers ran red. No one could stand against him. He chased Hector 3 times around the walls of Troy, and at last, they stood face to face. Hector fought with honor, but Achilles was unstoppable. He killed him, and surrendering to his rage, dragged Hector's body behind his chariot, circling the walls of Troy for days. The madness was ended by Priam, Troy's aged and broken king. Guided by Hermes, he entered the Greek camp at night and knelt before Achilles, not as a kingy, but as a father. Achilles wept to return Hector's body, and for a brief moment, the war fell silent. But Achilles would not live to see Troy's end. A poisoned arrow shot by Paris, or guided by Apollo pierced his heel. He died young, undefeated, and the war continued without him. The Iliad ends not with victory, but with a funeral. Troy still stands. The horse has not yet been built, but fate has already changed its course. The 10-year war had drained the land. Troy stood wounded yet unbroken, like an old lion still on its feet. Priam's sons had fallen one by one. Hector, the city's shield, was dead. Still, the Trojans endured, while the Greeks grew weary and cruel. And one morning, the Greeks were gone. New ships, new soldiers. Only a massive wooden horse stood before the gates. Priam was suspicious. Warnings were spoken. Laocoon hurled his spear at the horse and cried, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts." But when serpents rose from the sea and killed him and his sons, the people believed it was a sign. The horse was brought into the city. That night, Troy slept, and death emerged from the horse. Greek soldiers flooded the streets. The fleet returned. This was not a battle, it was a slaughter. Priam was killed at Zeus' altar. Cassandra was dragged from her temple. Hector's infant was thrown from the walls. Troy burnt. By morning, only ashes remained. But even the victors could not escape the curse. Ajax drowned. Agamemnon was murdered in his own home. Odysseus wandered for years. Only Aeneas escaped with purpose, carrying his father on his back and leading his son by the hand. He carried the last spark of Troy westward. The fall of Troy did not end the story. It only changed the shape of the stories that would be told. The gods were not satisfied with the destruction of Troy. Instead of peace, they sent storms. The winds that once carried the Greeks to war now scattered them across the corners of the world. Agamemnon was the first to return, or so it seemed. With him came Cassandra, the Trojan prophetess, and the shadow of past sins followed them both. The sacrifice of his daughter, Iphigenia, had not been forgotten neither by the gods, nor by his wife. During the king's absence, Clytemnestra had taken Aegisthus, a man of a cursed bloodline, as her lover. When Agamemnon entered his palace in triumph, he was in fact walking toward his death. He was murdered in his own home. Cassandra died with him. Clytemnestra called it justice, but blood once again called for blood. Years later, their son Orestes returned from exile and killed both his mother and her lover, guided by Apollo and driven into madness by the Erinyes. This tale became the symbol of guilt and atonement. Not all returns were the same. Menelaus and Helen wandered the seas for years. Some tales say the Helen who went to Troy was only a phantom, while the true Helen waited in Egypt. Others say she went willingly and was ultimately forgiven. When they returned to Sparta, there was peace, but it was fragile. The longest and most painful journey belonged to Odysseus. The architect of the wooden horse had earned Poseidon's wrath. For 10 years, he was cast from island to island. He blinded the Cyclops, escaped Circe, listened to the siren's song, and lost every one of his men. At last, alone and disguised as a beggar, he returned to Ithaca. His home was overrun by suitors. With his son and his bow, he reclaimed it in blood. Others met even darker ends. Lesser Ajax was drowned by Athena. Diomedes was betrayed and driven into exile. Neoptolemus, son of Achilles, was slain at Apollo's altar. Victory had been promised, only ruin remained. There was no victor in the Trojan War, only survivors. And behind it all stood the gods. Before heroes' walls and ships, there was chaos. Gaia, Uranus, Cronus, and the Titans came first. Zeus overthrew them with lightning and fire, imprisoned them in Tartarus. and raised the Olympian gods to power. The Olympians were not distant forces. They were magnified reflections of humanity. Jealous, passionate, cruel, and proud. Zeus ruled the sky, Poseidon the sea, Hades the dead, Hera governed marriage, Athena wisdom and strategy, Apollo prophecy, Artemis nature, Demeter the seasons, Aphrodite desire, Ares war, Hephaestus iron, Hermes boundaries, and Hestia the quiet fire of the hearth. They interfered in human lives, rewarded and punished, yet even their power was not limitless. Beneath them lay older forces, and above them stood fate, a power no one could fully command. The Olympian gods were powerful, but they were not invulnerable. They could be bound by oaths, deceived by mortals, and worn down by time. Even Zeus feared his father's fate. The thought that one day his own child might overthrow him never left his mind. That is why he gave up Thetis and married her to a mortal. Thus her son, Achilles, would die young and never threaten Olympus. In this way, the gods were very much like humans. They feared losing power, clung to their thrones, and struggled to preserve their order. For a time, they ruled without question. Temples bore their names, and their symbols were carved into shields and coins. The age of heroes had ended, but the gods still shaped human fate. Yet the whisper of change had already begun. Olympus still stood for now, but the Olympians were not alone. Beside them moved darker and older powers, gods of madness, rebirth, and secret rites. Foremost among them was Dionysus, the last to join Olympus and the most unsettling god. He was the son of Zeus and the mortal When Semele beheld Zeus's true form, she was destroyed. Zeus saved the child and sewed him into his own thigh. Thus, Dionysus was born twice. He did not sit on a throne. He wandered far from Olympus, among nymphs and wild lands. He was raised. He traveled with wine, music, and ecstatic followers. Where he passed, vines grew, and reason loosened its grip. Dionysus was not only the god of wine, but of transformation, of the thin line between joy and madness. Cities resisted him. Kings mocked him. Perseus, king of Thebes, tried to suppress his cult. Dionysus deceived him and lured him into the wilderness. There, in divine madness, Perseus was torn apart, led by his own mother. The message was clear. To deny a god is to lose oneself. Dionysus was also the god of theater, masks, and illusion. Greek tragedy and comedy were born from his festivals. Unspoken fears found their voice on the stage. With him came the mystery cults. The Eleusinian mysteries promised rebirth. The Orphic spoke of a Dionysus who was torn apart and reborn, and whispered of the soul's salvation. These beliefs did not destroy Olympus, but they shook it. The gods began to crack. Apollo's loves ended in death. Aphrodite granted desire, then punished it. Ares and Athena argued over the meaning of war. The gods began to resemble the humans they ruled, proud, wounded, and divided. Dionysus became both mirror and threat to the Olympian order. Through him, divinity ceased to be distant. Humans could feel the god within themselves, not in temples, but in ritual, song, and madness. And far away, beyond the seas, new powers were rising. Rome was being born. Olympus felt the wind changing direction. The gods did not rule only from above. They descended into the world, fell in love, and left children behind. Demigods were born, neither fully accepted nor easily contained. Some became kings, some became monsters, a few became legend. The greatest of them was Heracles, son of Zeus and immortal Alcmene, born through deception, raised in Hera's hatred. While still an infant, he strong-led the serpents sent to to kill him. Heracles was famous not for his strength, but for his suffering. Driven mad by Hera, he killed his wife and children. To atone, he was ordered to serve King Eurypylus and complete 12 impossible labors. He strung-led lions, defeated monsters, stole sacred relics, and descended into Hades' sand. Returned alive. What made him immortal was not his muscles, but his endurance. The labors of Heracles were never merely displays of strength. Each was a confrontation with death, pain, and the limits of the human soul. Through suffering, he became more than a hero. He became a symbol of endurance. When he was finally killed by a garment poisoned with centaur blood, he built his own funeral pyre and willingly climbed upon it. As his mortal body burned, the gods received him into Olympus. Even Hera, at last, accepted him as a god. He became the only god born entirely from suffering. But Heracles was not the only demigod. Before him came Perseus, son of Zeus and Dino. Imprisoned because of a prophecy, Dino was reached by Zeus as golden rain. Perseus was born, and he and his mother were cast into the sea, but fate protected them. Years later, sent by a jealous king to retrieve Medusa's head, Perseus succeeded with the aid of Hermes and Athena. He beheaded the Gorgon without meeting her gaze. From her blood, Pegasus was born. Perseus rescued Andromeda, married her, and founded a lineage that would one day lead to Hera. There were other demigods as well. Theseus slew the Minotaur. Bellerophon flew upon Pegasus but rose too high and fell. Atalanta, raised by bears, outran all others, yet was defeated by love. None of them found peace. Too human to be divine, too mortal to be immortal. The gods watched them with both pride and fear. Their suffering made them eternal in story. As Troy faded into memory and cities rose and fell, these stories endured. They filled temples, theaters, and poems. As the gods grew distant, humans saw themselves in these demigods, flawed, brave, magnificent, and condemned. But beneath gods and heroes lay an older force, fate. Not a god yet feared even by gods. The Greeks called it Moira. Sometimes it was three sisters. One spun the thread of life. One measured it, one cut it. Even Zeus could not stop them. Fate was woven into the fabric of the world. So, what was humanity's hope? Not to change fate, but to understand it. That is why prophecies and omens existed. At Delphi, Apollo spoke in riddles. Prophecies were clear, yet never precise. Those who misread them destroyed themselves. Across Greece, centers of prophecy stood the rustling of leaves, dreams, birds, lightning, the entrails of sacrifices. All were messages from the gods. Seers were as powerful as kings. Blind Tiresias saw everything, yet his words almost always brought disaster. Prophecy was not power. It was awareness, and more often than not, awareness that arrived too late was no different from tragedy. Yet still, people pursued prophecy. They climbed the mountain pass leading to Delphi, offered gold, and asked their questions with trembling voices. Fate could not be changed, but it could be faced. Knowing that a storm was coming would not stop it, but it allowed one to die with open eyes. This is where the Greeks found meaning. Their stories were not about defeating fate, but about standing against it with honor. Hector knew he would die, yet he fastened his armor. Achilles knew he would never return, yet he sailed for Troy. Oedipus fled from his fate and struck directly into its heart. Meanwhile, the Pythia continued whispering riddles through the smoke. Her words were the cold breath of a world whose decisions had already been made. To the Greeks, death was not an ending, but a final breath. After it came Hades, This underworld laid beneath the earth, where all were equal. Its ruler was the god Hades, a name so feared that many called him Plauton, the wealthy one. The underworld was shaped not by logic, but by myth. It was surrounded by 5 rivers, Styx of oaths, Acheron of sorrow, fiery Cocytus of lamentation, and Lethe of forgetting. Souls arrived as shadows. If they carried coins, they crossed Acheron. With Charon, those left unburied wandered the shores for years. At the gate stood, beyond lay the asphodel meadows. Neither joy nor suffering existed there, but judgment was inevitable. Minos, Rhadamanthys, and Iacchus weighed every life. The wicked fell into Tartarus. Sisyphus pushed his stone. Tantalus remained forever thirsty. Ixion spun upon his burning wheel. The virtuous went to Elysium. A few drank from Lethe and were reborn. Others hoped, through mystery cults, to escape the cycle entirely. Hades was neither cruel nor merciful. He did not interfere. He ruled what could not be changed. At his side stood Perseus. Her abduction had driven the world into famine. Her time divided between realms created the seasons. In time, Persephone became not a captive, but the queen of death and renewal in the Eleusinian mysteries. Her descent and return were reenacted. It was believed that not only the earth, but the soul itself could be reborn. Some mortals traveled to Hades and returned. Orpheus lost Eurydice by looking back. Heracles brought Cerberus to the surface. Odysseus spoke with the dead and learned that death held no glory. Even Achilles said he would rather be a living slave than a king among shadows. For this reason, the Greeks honored their dead. They dug graves, poured wine, spoke names. The dead lived on in dreams and memory. Hades was neither heaven nor hell. It was silence, an unchanging truth, and the final destination of every ended life. In that silence, the Greeks glimpsed eternity. Through the stories of Hades and Persephone, they framed death not as a punishment, but as a universal passage. For them, even the gods were not eternal, not in power, not in memory, and not in belief. In every mythological age, there comes a moment when the divine falls silent. For Olympus, this moment did not arrive through war, but through Rome. The Romans did not destroy the Greek gods, they transformed them. Zeus became Jupiter, Hera became Juno, Athena became Minerva. The wild gods of Greece were adapted to Rome's order. The gods remained, but they grew distant. They became symbols rather than presences. New beliefs rose. Mithras, Isis, and a single invisible god. These faiths did not merely compete with Olympus. They rendered it meaningless. At the same time, philosophy eroded myth from within. Plato questioned the morality of the gods. Epicurus claimed they did not concern themselves with humanity. The Stoics found divinity within reason itself. With the imperial cult, the gods became emblems. The final blow came with Christianity, a single, absolute faith. By law, temples were closed, sacrifices forbidden. There was no war. The Olympian gods withdrew in silence. Statues weathered, altars grew cold, but myths did not die. They ceased to be belief and became story. They returned in Renaissance art. They became allegory in the Enlightenment. The Romantics found tragedy within them. In the modern age, they re-emerged in novels, cinema, and psychology. Odysseus still journeys. Persephone still returns each spring. Names change, truths remain. Myth lives because it exists in memory and imagination. What the Greeks left us was not gods, but a way of understanding the world. The gods left Olympus, but they did not leave us. They were carried into stories. The mountain wind grew cold, the torches went out, but the myths remained.
Good night.